This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
I really needed a little baseball for tonight, but unfortunately, Marlins have been postponed. The Heat lost last night, 116-98. The news is not good, obviously, with injuries to Dragon, Bam, and Butler. And a man that's been all over the Heat and always all over the news from the Heat is my guy Ethan Skolnick from 5 Reasons Sports. Of course, you can follow him on Twitter at Ethan J. Skolnick. Also follow 5 Reasons Sports and download the podcast there too. You will enjoy the information. Ethan, how you doing, my friend? Do we have him? Wait a minute. Hold on. Okay. Let's try again. Hold on. Ethan, talk. Tell me if see if we got you. All right.
I'm having a hard
there
time.
We
I'm
go.
having a hard time hearing you. There you go. Okay.
There we go. There we go. So last night, obviously, brutal injuries. You were all over it. What have you heard? What can we expect for tomorrow from the 3 players?
Well, Jimmy Butler's going to play. He went down with the ankle and he had to hobble off, but he just said he's going to play and he'll be expected to play well, and I wouldn't expect anything less. I mean, it's a mild sprain from what I've heard, so he's okay. Bam's situation is a little bit more complicated. You know, that shoulder, where they didn't really reveal the injury in the last series, he re-injured it. He's got some other sort of complications related to it now. They listed hhim as doubtful. I heard he's out. Whenever the Heat, as you know, lists somebody as doubtful, that means they're out. Because they tend to go that direction. And then, Dragic is really unfortunate. I just got off the Zoom calls with Butler and Hero, and they're kind of talking like they're not expecting him back this series, and that's what I've heard. I mean, can he get a shot to come back? He can try. He's not going to have any lift or explosiveness. There's other factors to consider here, too. You and I have both covered the Heat long enough to remember Tim Hardaway playing with plantar fasciitis.
And Zoe.
And
I covered Jason Taylor with plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, it's a rough thing. I mean, it has to snap, which I heard it did last night for it to heal. But the problem is that once it snaps, then you have to take time off. And so can he take a shot and try to play? Yes, but here's something else to consider, Big O. He's a free agent after this season. Like, Goran's going to push to play because that's Goran. But you have to think of the long-term consequences here, too. I mean, if he has 100% confidence that the Heat are going to take care of him this offseason, which is what I've heard, for a 1-year deal, and then after that, when you get to 2021, they'll work out a 2-year deal with bird rights or whatever at a lower number. If he has total confidence in that and the fact that he can't hurt it any worse, he's going to try to play. But I think the wise thing to do is to tell him no. I just, you're starting the next season. I understand that you only get to the finals, so many times, if at all. But they're starting the next season in January. We're only like 2.5. We're not 2 months away from that at this point, 2-3 months. I don't think it's wise. And so I really don't expect him to play the rest of the series. And not just that, but other guys, they have this history with foot injuries. I mean, Grant Hill against them in the 99 playoffs was never the same after playing through. And Udonis Haslem, I've had many conversations with UD about, him rushing back in 2011 after that foot injury. It's a different injury, but he came back, and he has said he was never really the same player. And so I just don't think you're 34 years old, you're going into free agency. You've done enough, man. Like, I mean, he's earned his spot here, maybe even earned his jersey in the rafters. I think they have to go forward without him. But the question becomes, okay, then what do? I mean, Butler was defiant today. He says, I know everybody thinks they're going to just do the same thing just 3 times. I beg to differ. But I think if you look at what you can do lineup-wise, the bigger problem for them is Bam. I mean, I love Goran, but Goran's scoring can kind of be replaced by Kendrick Nunn if you get the Kendrick Nunn from last night. They don't have anybody who can do the things that Bam can do. And what I thought when I thought Bam was going to play was you go back to the original starting lineup because there's a comfort level. So you put Myers Leonard in for 6 minutes, the first half and the second half, and you start Nunn. You move Jay back to the bench with Iguodala and Hero, and you kind of fill out an Olynyk, and you fill out your bench, and you have a good rotation with a starting lineup that's used to playing together. You get the extra big in there to deal with Howard. So Bam doesn't have to deal with both of them. But now that Bam's out, I don't know what you do. You start Skolnick, maybe. He's going to get destroyed by Anthony Davis. It's a really tough spot that they're in, and honestly, I picked them in 7, but this may be a sweep.
Yeah, well, you could do what one of our listeners said: just put KZ on AD because he's the only one that can really defend them. I was like, okay, all right.
2 years from now, 2 years from now, Big O, because he is their next star, but he's not there yet. So
all right, so let me ask you something. Last night was the first time, even before the injury started and mounted. Mm-hmm. Once we hit that midway part of the first quarter, it was the first moments where it looked like the moment was too big for them. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
And that's the part. That's, to me, that's actually more of the disturbing ingredient out of all of it, because you add the injuries and then the loss, and then I talked about this earlier on the show. They have now lost the advantage they had in every other series. They dominated every other series. They were leading every other series. So when they would fall behind in a game or whatever, it wasn't a big deal because they were in control of the series. Now you're already down 1-0, and you're down players, and now are you down confidence too? Because even Tyler Hero kind of looked a little bit, like a deer in headlights at times last night.
Well, Anna, he was minus 35 yesterday. Minus 35, that's hard to do. And he, Butler said it today. Jimmy was the only one who looked ready for the stage. I thought his start was great. He was attacking. He wasn't settling. He went straight at the two bigs. They fell apart when he went out of the game. They completely fell apart. And you're right. It did start to happen before Dragic was out for good. I think Tyler got thrown into a weird position last night. He had to start the second half. He's been playing as a reserve with that other group. I do think that the moment was a little too big for him last night. Duncan was kind of useless last night. He didn't give them anything in 27 minutes, and they isolated him defensively. You can't. My co-host Alex Salito talked about it. You can't have him switching onto LeBron consistently. They have to figure out something else there. And the Lakers, I give the Lakers credit. Vogel, Heat fans don't like to give Vogel credit because it goes back to the Indiana, but they had a really good plan last night. And I think, once they started to make the threes, because the Heat's whole strategy was, we're going to make the Lakers into shooters. They're not a real good shooting team, and they're not really good at defending the three. But once KCP and Danny Green and even Rondo started making outside shots, there really was no plan B for Miami. And then Anthony Davis started to get what Anthony Davis gets. And to me, he's the bigger problem than LeBron in this series. He's a top 5 player, Big O, and he's so versatile. You look, as great as LeBron is, and nobody thinks he's greater than I think he is, obviously. I've covered him all those years up close. But as great as he is, there are ways to scheme him. They have wing defenders who've guarded him well before, okay? Iguodala, Crowder, and Jimmy, and then I also thought Bam would get a lot of time on him. But they don't have an answer for AD. I mean, their only answer is really Bam. But then when Bam picked up the second, that was the other thing. When Bam picked up the second foul, it was supposed for only playing one big. That also took them out of everything they wanted to do. So I think some of it was a little bit of stage fright. I think Tyler in particular will get better in the next game. Sure. I don't have quite the same confidence in Duncan because he's been so up and down in the playoffs. But, look, if they're going to make this a series, now obviously Tyler's going to have to be great because Jimmy needs some Dragic has taken so much of the burden off of Jimmy as a playmaker and as a scorer, and not to have his guy. I mean, it's his guy. That's his closest friend on the team. Not to have his guy with him is really, really difficult. And it was kind of sad. Jimmy today was like, I had to tell G, this is not your fault. You didn't let us down. I mean, it's, he's like, we got to pay it back for him now. But it's a tough task. It just is. And it's a shame, because, you look at last year, we didn't have a real NBA Finals because Durant was hurt, Clay was hurt. And now we're probably not going to have a real NBA Finals. And there's been other NBA Finals like this. Like, you go all the way back to Riley coaching, Magic and Byron Scott going out with hamstring injuries and them getting swept by the Pistons. Sometimes this happens. You get to the end, of a long playoff run, and guys are a little more susceptible to injury, and stuff happens. And
Bulls,
it's
Lakers.
just unfortunate it happened to them.
Bulls, Lakers, dude. I mean, that team that the Lakers, that was Sedale Threet, right? Was there with Magic or whatever it was?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that team, right. Well, the Magic team, the team that lost to the Bulls, but also the team that lost to the Pistons was a big one. Because Byron Scott and Magic both went out with hamstring injuries, and they just got swept by Isaiah, 4-0.
Yeah. And so do you, with Tyler, I guess Jimmy has to have some kind of conversation with him and Spo, and then kind of inspire him to, like, hey, kid, you're going to handle the ball more. You're going to need to be a little bit more of a playmaker and not just a scorer tonight. Is that kind of the plan, I would imagine?
Yeah, I mean, he can do it. I mean, he's shown it. I just think, look, he's 20. He's entitled to a bad night. I think
he's a baby, bro.
He's a baby. It's incredible. Look, this experience, whatever happens, and I don't want to write it off completely. This experience for this group is so good. It's just, I mean, being together for 2 months, playing high level competition, playing the Celtics, playing Giannis, playing the Lakers. I mean, it's tremendous for them. It's tremendous for him. I mean, think of the way that Dwayne grew out of that rookie season. Just playing 2 series, right, against the Hornets and against the Pacers, and what he became that next year. I mean, this is enormous for Hero, for Bam, maybe even for Duncan. But yeah, they're up against it. But no, the other guy is Kendrick Nunn, and Kendrick Nunn is capable. Kendrick Nunn last night, and it's funny, I had Antonio Daniels, former NBA player, was on SiriusXM NBA on my pod this morning, and he says, I don't believe in garbage time. He's like, this idea that guys get buckets in garbage time, it doesn't mean anything. He says it means something. He says last night, Kendrick Nunn, after a month or 2 months of fighting it, found his rhythm. He says that'll carry over, okay? And so if they need 2 players to step up here, in my opinion, okay? If they can get early season Kendrick Nunn, and they can get the Kelly Olynyk, who we have seen plenty of times over the past 3 years, they can be competitive offensively. I mean, those 2 guys can make a big difference. Kendrick Nunn does some things that nobody else on the team does. He's got a mid-range game. He can get to the basket. He just sometimes shoots them out of games.
Right.
But now it's like he's got the green light. I actually think he's going to start. Spo, he doesn't like to mess with his rotation. He's got Hero comfortable off the bench. I think Kendrick starts the game, and then I think Hero comes in for Robinson, and they give Hero and Nunn a lot of minutes together. But look, if Kendrick Nunn can compete defensively and give him 22, which is something he was first team all rookie. If he can do that, he can make up for some of Dragic's production.
Yeah,
the problem is
remember,
makes up for Bam.
It's not just the bubble. Kendrick has, and I know last night, and by the way, when the series started, I said either Derek or Kendrick have to be included in this attack on the Lakers. They needed to add one more gun to it, and it was nice to see Kendrick, but unfortunately everybody else went by the wayside. But the problem that I have with Kendrick is he has not shot well the entire year. He hasn't shot well since the end of last year. That the first couple of months is where he had his run. After that, his shot started failing.
Well, that's not
even before we went into quarantine. His shot was not working already for a while at that point. So that's the thing. That is this just an aberration, or is this the same dude we've seen since 2020?
Well, I actually think if you look at the numbers, I'm with you to a point. He had the great first couple months. Teams adjusted to him. They realized he wasn't going to pass. They started playing him to score, and it became a problem for him. And so I get that. And then he had an Achilles injury, if you remember, prior to All-Star break, and he was awful for 2 weeks. And then I was in, I covered the Rising Stars game in Chicago, okay? And he looked different. Like he had a couple days rest. And he came out of All-Star. Those next 3 weeks, he shot 48% from 3. He had a really good, so he did have a second run. And then right before the COVID break, he started to struggle a little bit. But the other thing with Kendrick is there's more going on than people know. I'll just say that. Part of it was come back late from COVID. He's dealing with a personal issue, that a lot of men can relate to. That was problematic. I'll just put it at that. And I was basically told it's a wonder he's playing at all. Okay. And when he left the bubble, it was to deal with the situation that is, in my understanding, not of his making. Okay, so he's had, when the players keep saying Kendrick's been dealing with a lot, it's a lot, and then he comes back, and Dragic takes over. Hero has progressed, and he just kind of loses his place. But I will say this. Everything I've heard is, everybody talks about how great Leonard's been as a teammate. Everything I've heard is none has been great as a teammate. Like, he's been engaged. And actually, we had Hero on our pod, and he said that's who he hangs out the most with in the bubble. So they have a natural – Tyler and Kendrick, going back to Summer League, have a natural chemistry. They got to capture that. The two of them have a natural chemistry with Duncan. That was their Summer League team, the three of them. Those three with Jimmy and maybe with Kelly, okay, have to find a way to create offense, and then you have Iguodala and Crowder as defenders. They have enough good players to make this competitive. The problem is not, as much as I love Goran, the problem is Bam. Everything they do.
Yeah, no, you can't stop. AD's tough enough with Bam. AD's tough enough with Bam. Now without Bam, how the hell do you stop that animal? That dude's a beast, bro.
You can't, man. He's a top 5 player. I mean, he doesn't get talked about that way, but it's funny when people talked about Giannis.
Because he breaks down so much. That's why.
Well, that's the thing. But he really hasn't broken down that much the past couple of years, though. I understand that he earned that.
Right.
He earned that reputation, but he's been better. But the thing is, he's like, when everybody talked about going after Giannis, and that's another conversation. I'm like, no, the guy who fits here is AD. Now the problem is they're going to win a title. He's not going anywhere.
Right.
But he is he is Giannis with a jump shot. Like it's and it's. He's top 5. He's top 5.
But this team and this coaching staff can teach Giannis how to shoot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's where I would hold out hope.
Actually, losing in the finals may help them get Giannis, because Giannis is not going to want to join a team that's already won a championship.
Exactly.
So there is a little bit of a silver lining here. And there's no shame if they lose this series with everything that's happened.
Oh.
But yeah, you want to compete, and I think they have enough to compete. I just don't think they have enough to win.
All right, Ethan Skolnick from 5 Reasons Sports joining us. You can follow him on Twitter at Ethan J. Skolnick, and of course at 5 Reasons Sports. You look at tomorrow. Are they going? Mm-hmm. Okay, you talked a little bit about the lineup changes, and. What about for the Lakers? What are you expecting them to do? Because they didn't start off well. So, and they got to be, LeBron smelling blood, AD smelling blood right now. Frank Vogel is an aggressive coach. He was aggressive with Indiana. I think that they're going to Miami better be prepared for a Laker team that's going to want to put them out right away tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, they've had some lapses over the course of the season, but it's mostly due to the shooting. Their shooting variance is what makes them vulnerable. But I don't think you change much if you're Vogel. Dwight's minutes were bad. They were down 13 when he came out in the first half, and he didn't put it back in that half. But I think you stay with it. I think the thing that's problematic for Miami, honestly, is Markieff Morris, because they don't have to play JaVale McGee in this series. Morris gives them more versatility. He made a couple threes last night. So I think maybe you go to Markieff earlier to play with AD and throw AD at the 5. The problem is I think they'll adjust a little bit based on what Spoelstra does. If it's going to be Myers-Leonard, Myers' physicality will help you with Dwight, but you can't cover AD. So I don't – and Kelly, has sort of the lateral quickness to cover AD maybe some of the time, but he's not physical enough as a rebounder. So it's tough, man. If I'm Vogel, I throw out my 5. I just say, here, look, you're shorthanded. We're not. I've got the 2 best players, and we're just going to play. And I don't really think he has to change much from last night. I thought Spoelstra did an okay job of mixing into zone. He didn't play a lot of it. But if you're Vogel, why change? And the funny thing about it is, you mentioned Vogel's an aggressive coach. He is. But he's also gotten much more flexible this year. I talked to Sedano a lot about this. He'll start a different lineup in the second half than the first half. But if you go back to the Indiana days, remember, the way Vogel always talked about it was, I'm going to put out my 5. He stayed big. When Spoelstra went small against Vogel, remember when he went, he stayed big. He still stayed with Hibbert and West.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so he likes to play big. He's not, Eric likes to play small. Vogel likes to play big. I don't think you need to change it. I just don't. I think maybe just a little bit more Markieff Morris, and that's it. I mean, I wouldn't touch it.
All right, so one more thing, Ethan, before I let you go. The plan is this short off season that's coming up, this isn't the off season for Miami. It's the summer after this upcoming season is when the space is available and they will attempt to try to get that other big piece, correct?
It is, but they also have some flexibility this offseason. They've got some decisions. Now, they were before the COVID thing happened, they by making the Winslow trade, they actually put themselves in a position where they were fourth in the league in cap space this upcoming offseason. But I don't know how much space is going to be allowed, okay? So they're still in good position, but I don't know if they're going to smooth the cap. I'm not sure what they're going to do. So what they can do, and they will do, is go after guys on one-year deals.
Okay.
I mean, they're not going to extend it to 2021. But, for instance, they've got four of their own free agents, right? They've got Dragic, who they have to take care of. They've got Jay Crowder, who they want to take care of. And then they've got Myers Leonard and Derek Jones Jr., who are only staying if they take less. And Derek, I think, is gone because he hasn't been a part of the rotation during the playoffs. And some other team is going to overpay. A bad team's going to overpay a guy like Derek Jones Jr. And
he was a complete goofball last night, by the way. I mean, he was not mentally into it, bro.
I know.
I don't care about LeBron schooling him. That part I expect because he's a rail-thin guy, and LeBron is a Peterbilt truck. But the other things that he did, missing the bunny and the bad passes and all that, I was a little disappointed in him. It didn't seem like he was ready when he came off the bench.
I think they've lost a little bit of faith in him. I still think a team like the Chicago or New York is going to give a guy like Derek Jones Jr. money, figuring they can draw more out of him, whereas Miami kind of realizes what he is, which is that he has the potential to be a really high-level role player, but not a frontline guy. And I don't think they're going to overpay him. I think they've learned from the Tyler Johnson, Hassan Whiteside mistakes.
The athlete.
And they're not going to do it. And here's the other thing. They've got, as we joked about earlier, they've got Akpala waiting, right? So he has higher upside than Derek Jones Jr. So I think that they'll let Derek walk. I think they'll say to Myers, hey, will you come back for a year at $5 million and be one of our bigs? And I think he might take it. But they're going to make a run at guys on one-year deals. The guys I would watch are Paul Millsap, Serge Ibaka, okay? I think Ibaka is a beautiful fit with Bam. They've always wanted Ibaka. And Toronto's got some tough decisions to make, too, because they've got Van Vliet as a free agent. They got to decide what they're going to do with Lowry. But the other guy to look at is Kyle Lowry. I mean, Jimmy wants to play with him. He's in the last year of his deal at $30 million. He was kind of talking at the end of it like, he didn't think he was going to be with this group next year. They've gone after him before, as you know. If they could bring in Kyle Lowry and then move Goran back to the bench and find a way to make it work financially with Lowry's contract coming up after next season, they'll do it.
All right.
So I would watch that.
All right, one more, because Riley's made a living off of this. Is there a disgruntled star out there that could be had? Because that's where he's a freaking master at.
Well, he's made his whole career off of it, right? Every guy they brought in, that's been the case. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple. I mean, Victor Oladipo, but I don't think that they're going to forfeit 2021 for Victor Oladipo. Yeah. I just don't. But that's the number one. I mean, I thought it might be Donovan Mitchell, but Mitchell is committed to staying in Utah, so it's not him. Lowry's not a disgruntled star. He's somebody who's always wanted to play in Miami and has always wanted to play with Jimmy. So I think that's an option. The other guy I would really watch, and I think is just a beautiful fit for them, is Drew Holiday. And the question is, where is David Griffin on the timeline there? Because if he's re-signing Ingram to pair with Zion, Holiday's been in the league forever. He's really not that old, okay, because he came in at like 18, 19. But he's the perfect, and Jimmy loves him too. And he's an offense, but mostly defense guy. He's just a perfect complement to Tyler Hero in the backcourt. So I would look at Drew Holiday, but it depends. Does David Griffin think that Drew Holiday is not going to still be the player he is when Zion gets to that top level? And if that's the case, he might move him. And there is a history of Griffin working with Andy and with Pat. So I would look at Drew Holiday as to me he's a better option than Victor Oladipo.
Follow him on Twitter at Ethan J. Skolnick. And, of course, go to 5 Reasons Sports, at 5 Reasons Sports on Twitter. Go to the website, download the podcast. Always great information. Ethan, you're a stud, my brother. You stay safe out there. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, so.
You got it. There you go. Ethan Skolnick, good stuff there.